Hello and welcome to another edition of Kayak Fishing Weekly. We're the show on the Serious Angler Podcast Network that's dedicated to all things kayak fishing. I'm your host, Justin Largen. Welcome, welcome. We got a fun show lined up. I'm excited for this topic. It's something that I'm interested in. I'm not very good with it, but it's going to be kind of a technique based show. And I won't well, I'll throw a little tease. We're going to talk about some big baits. At this point, you've probably already seen the title and clicked on it. And I don't know exactly what title we're going to use at this point, but my plan here, we're not talking about little bitty baits. We're not talking about, 2.8 Kitex, finesse stuff. We're talking about big swim baits, whether it's rats, glides, stuff like the bull shad. We're going to talk some big baits with a couple of guys who are much better at it than I am. So hopefully I'm going to learn something. Hopefully it'll be a chance for you to learn something. But before I bring these gentlemen on and we kind of jump into the meat of the show, I want to talk a little bit about news. Um, so first, it's not so much kayak fishing related, but iCast. I enjoy iCast. I'm kind of a bait junkie. I love seeing all the new stuff these bait companies come up with. Whether it's a rod company, bait company. I like seeing all the new toys. Electronics, we've seen some huge advancements over the last few years. So I am looking forward to that. I had a chance to go last year. That was a really cool opportunity. Won't be able to, I won't be there this year myself. Um, but I will definitely be tuning in to all the coverage that I can find. And yeah, I'll probably be spending more money than I should on the baits as soon as I can get my hands on them. But iCast coming up later this month is going to be July 16th, 17th, 18th, and I believe it ends the 19th. 4 days. I think that's right. But yeah, I'm excited about iCast. The other thing, and again, it's not so much kayak fishing news, but it was kind of news to me. It hit home a little bit because I've been a Quantum fan for a long time. Um, about the time I was first getting into fishing, uh, Kevin Van Dam was kind of lighting the world on fire, and he was a Quantum guy. He designed those crankbait rods that probably a lot of you have thrown, maybe a lot of you thrown. I know I threw them. I threw exclusively Quantum rods and reels for a really long time, and that's still the only reels that I throw. Um, but the news came out. I saw it. I'm sure it's on Facebook too, but I saw it on Instagram that they are moving to all saltwater, which, again, it kind of hurt a little bit because, uh, and not even just Kevin Van Dam. What was the other? Bill Dance. Bill Dance. I mean, how many episodes of Bill Dance did you see where he talks about the techniques, the equipment that he's using, and it's a Quantum rod. Um, so it's good to know the brand's still going to be around. I don't know how long, or I guess how quick this transition is going to be. I'm going to be looking to see if any of those reels uh, get discounted anywhere. I'm going to try and snatch some of those up probably. But Quantum going to be moving from freshwater to saltwater. So thought that was interesting. Again, not so much kayak specific, but I thought it was newsworthy. On the tournament front, we've had one major tournament since our last episode. It was the Hobie Worlds. Uh, I did not follow it as closely as I probably should have, but it was up on Lake St. Clair, and I believe they fished the Canadian side of the lake, so the upper end, northern end of the lake. Um, I've been to St. Clair once, and I think for that tournament we had to stay on the U.S. side. So I was fishing. I think it was it was Michigan. I think it was out of Michigan. Um, I can remember vaguely the ramp that I was in. Amazing fishery, some huge smallmouth in there. Um, it was a really cool place. I remember fishing that tournament. I think the one day I caught 90 inches, and I was in like 15th or something. Uh, there were a lot of guys that put up massive limits. I think it took 100 inches of smallmouth to win that tournament back in 21, whenever that was. But a little bit tougher, it looked like from the totals. But I'll run through these guys. Yeah, we'll just do first, second, third. First place, Jack Gamey. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. He put up 274 and a quarter inches over 3 days of competition. He hails from Australia. Congrats to him. That is a really, really cool feather in your cap. Really cool tournament. It is not easy to qualify for that, uh, but amazing accomplishment. Representatives from a bunch of different countries. In second place, Antoine Gagnon. I think I'm saying that right. I actually had a chance to meet Antoine in 2021 at the Bassmaster Kayak Series Championship. He cracked the top 10 in that tournament. So Antoine, also a hammer. He put up 262 inches, and Antoine is from Canada. So he was fishing. Well, I don't know how close to home. I know Canada's massive, but he was. I don't know how much of a home field advantage it was, but I'm sure he was comfortable at least. And then third place, the highest finishing United States angler, Mr. Ron Champion, 261 inches, representing the US of A. So congrats to those three. Cool tournament. I have never qualified. That's one thing I would like to qualify for one day. Uh, Definitely not going to be this year, but maybe somewhere down the road I can string together a few good tournaments and get an invite to that one. Be really cool to represent the home country. So congrats to all those guys who did just that. Let's see. We talked about tournaments that have happened. Upcoming tournaments. There are a few of them. Let's do it this way. So Hobie, uh, their next event's going to be not going to be until August. It's going to be August 10th and 11th, Saginaw River and Bay. That one, I'd love to make it. It's too far for me. Not in the cards this year, but that one should be a lot of fun. I think there's an opportunity to get out there in the bay and catch some smallmouth. I'm not sure how far guys have to go out in order to run into the smallmouth. Never fished that particular body of water, but it looks cool. I think it was MLF coverage that I watched a couple years ago. Maybe it was last year. So I've seen some of the coverage, and if I remember right, there were some guys catching some smallmouth offshore, but then other guys were up shallow around grass catching greenfish. And from what it looks like on a map, anyway, the river, it looks like you can get some greenfish up in the river. Uh, so again, August 10th for the Hobie event. If you can make it, I'm sure it'll be fun. Let's see, Bassmaster has got one a little closer. It's going to be the end of this month. It's going to be July 27th and 28th on the Susquehanna River. That place is awesome. I've been a few times. I have never had a particularly good tournament, but I've had a lot of fun each time that I've gone. It is a special, special place. Massive smallmouth in that current. It's a unique deal. You got the opportunity to catch some really big fish. And yeah, there's just not too many places like that we get to go to. It's another place where you can put up 90 inches and, you know, you get paid probably, but it takes a lot to win that one. I think it was 97, 98 inches a day to win the last Bassmaster event that was there. I know it was high. I think it was 95-inch average or greater a couple of years ago when Hobie was there. So it is an awesome, awesome fisher. Sad that I can't make that one also, but I'm sure that one's going to be well attended. The Susky is always a good time. And then I'll also mention the Kayak Adventure Series. We've talked about that one in previous episodes. This is their first year. It's Drew Gregory's series. It's a pretty cool concept. It's a little less. I don't know what the right word is. It's less. I don't want to say it's less competitive, but it's more focused on fun, camaraderie, having a good time, less about winning. I think that's a fair characterization. They're doing things a little bit different or differently. They are instead of the typical Saturday, Sunday, like a lot of the national trails are, they're doing a Friday, Saturday, and it's a Friday evening, I believe it, or Friday afternoon evening event. And then Saturday is more the full day. Is that right? Saturday? Yeah, I think that's right. And then so that gives time Sunday for guys to kick back a little bit. There's a lot of extracurricular activities that Drew has planned for his events, and this one is coming up very soon. Actually, just a couple of days. It's on. They're calling it Ozarkana. I think I got that right. Ozarkana. It's going to be in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And I don't know exactly what fisheries are going to be in play, but something that Drew's done with his series, it's not just one lake, it's not one fishery, it's a bunch of different places within kind of a several mile radius. And it's been cool so far to follow that series. It's gone to some places that other national trails have not, kind of showcasing some maybe out of the way places. We really are blessed in this country with a ton of good fishing all over the place. And I think Drew is showing that. So again, that one is coming up quick, just a couple days. If you have not signed up and made plans for that one, and you plan to, you better do it quick. And let's see, I think that is everything I got as far as news. So yeah, I guess it's about time to bring in our guests plural. I got two today. I'm excited about this. And I think I've talked about this before. I am a fan of the Bass After Dark podcast and their format. For anybody who hasn't listened, go check them out. They are not focused specifically on kayak fishing. It's more just sort of bass fishing at large, but it's always cool topics and they have a cool format. They bring in multiple guests. The guests don't know who the other guests are, and they bring in basically experts on a particular topic and then just let everybody talk. And I feel like I always learn something on that one. So I'm trying to steal from them a little bit. We got two guests tonight um, to help us learn about big swim baits. Can you fish them in a kayak? Can you make them work? Um, are there little tricks and techniques? That is what we're going to drive at. But before we do that, a quick word from our sponsors. All right, that was quick. And we're back. So, time to bring in our first guest. One of the most accomplished, especially for his age, one of the most accomplished guys in kayak fishing. I've had a chance to compete against him and to fish around him some. Um, I think he's already. I don't know how old he is. He's significantly younger than me, but he's a fantastic fisherman. He's won a bunch of tournaments, a crap ton of money fishing out of a kayak, and he also happens to be very good at fishing big baits. None other than Mr. Ewing Minor.
Hey, how's
Welcome.
it going?
I'm doing well. I feel like when I got off work today, I was a little tired, but like the caffeine was wearing off. But I feel like when I get to talk fishing, I get like a second wind. So I'm good. Congrats. I saw, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but I saw your Instagram post.
Yeah,
You had a good weekend.
yeah, I did. They had a tournament on. Well, it's been my playground for the summer. I found a new stretch of river that's very good, and they had a tournament, and it was in bounds. And I had my best day out there by a long shot. My best day before was 92, and I had 97 and a quarter. It's just
Dang.
everything that I've learned over the past month or two on that stretch of river. I've been there 2 to 3 times a week, but I put it all together and everything that I thought could work did work. So it
That's
was
awesome.
it was a spectacular day.
It looked like, at least from the photos, like you had it looked like a mixed bag. I saw one photo that was, it looked like a double, a
Yep.
big smallmouth.
He had a 19 and a quarter and a 19 and a half inch smallmouth at the same time.
I can't imagine. I've had doubles with like 12 inchers, sub 12 inchers, or one that's a keeper and one that's a non-keeper, but I've never had giants like that. That's awesome. And I also saw you had a great big one, big green fish.
Yeah, that was the only green fish in my limit. I did catch a bunch of 16 to 17-inch green ones, but they fish like that don't help on that river. There's, well, 17s can, but there's so many 17-inch fish that 85 is an easy mark to hit, but 90 can be a little bit tough. It's just,
Gotcha.
I
Well,
guess,
it
what
might be
sight.
easy for you. 85. I feel like that's a good day for me a lot of times.
That river, it's truly special. I've taken my girlfriend up there a few times, and she catches 17s and 16s, and she's caught an 18 or two. But it's just It's very healthy. There's tons of fish. It's the closest thing to the Susquehanna without driving to Pennsylvania that I've got. So
Dang,
I
that's
had
awesome.
quite a bit.
Yeah, hearing you describe it, it reminds me a little bit. I spend a lot of time in DC, and I'm sure I've talked about it before on the show. I fish the Potomac a lot, kind of near the city, and the big difference, there's a ton of 2 pound fish in that I guess river system, but I feel like the top end isn't quite there. It's
Yeah.
not like some other places. You can catch a big one every once in a while, but like you'll catch a 19-inch fish in the pre-spawn that's a 5 pounder.
Mhm.
But for a kayak tournament, it's 90 inches is a really good day a lot of the time.
Yeah, and
But
it usually on that stretch typically takes between 91 and 93 to win.
okay,
Um, I had 94 inches before I caught that big largemouth. That was kind of one of those deals.
you
I
would have
was
won anyway.
I was hunting down a largemouth. I knew it was coming. Well, I knew they lived in there. I changed locations a bit just to
Okay,
target some of those greenfish that live in the stretch. But it was
okay,
everything went well, and well, you can see by the results. But
yeah,
it was really fun.
cool. Well, I want to jump into the topic a little bit, and I kind of said it in the intro. You know what? I'm still not exactly sure what we'll title the episode as, but we're talking swim baits, and I'm not talking, your little finessey stuff like the Kitex. What I want to talk about is the stuff that I don't know. It's kind of intriguing to me, the idea of throwing big baits out of a kayak. I spent a little bit of time in California. I was there for a little over a year, and I kind of got into it right before I went out there, like that big bait mindset. I mean, I caught some fish with it. I caught a few big fish. I think the biggest I ever landed on a swim bait out there was, I think it was right at 8, maybe just a hair under. But I am by no means an expert. It's one of those things where I think I had success more just because I was stubborn and kept throwing it and kept throwing it, kept throwing it, and eventually ran across some. But you are good at it. I know I've heard through the grapevine. Well, I mean, just this weekend, you kind of showcase what you can do, at least with partially. Was it all with the glide bait, or was it
I had three on a glide bait in my limit, but
okay?
two on a bait that I'm not going to say until after the Susquehanna.
Gotcha. Okay. I like that. Yeah, I don't want you to give away too much juice, but I guess I want to pick your brain a little bit about kind of, for me, one of the problems is knowing when to put it down.
Mhm.
Um, I'll get to a lake and just kind of, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw it all day. I don't listen to kind of what's going on, and I struck out a lot with it. So I don't know if that's a problem that other guys have had with it, but hopefully we can jump into that. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So I guess we should kind of define big swim baits. And I was trying to think about how I would define them earlier today as, oh, the best I could come up with was something you'd have to throw with kind of a dedicated rod, like to separate it from some of the other swim baits. Is that fair, or like what do you consider a big swim bait?
Um, really just like that 6 inches or better. Not really. Most of my swim bait fishing isn't necessarily a big size swim bait.
Okay,
I almost exclusively throw glide baits as far as your bigger size swim baits. I like how reactive they are. You can make fish bite them. I'll throw a mag draft a lot, but I don't get into like the Huddlestons, the Defiant, I believe is what it's called, those big soft swim baits. It's just those I'm sitting there slow winding, and if a fish is behind it, there's nothing I can do.
that yeah, I feel like I'm I don't want to jump too far into it, but I've had that same experience. I noticed it a lot in California. The closest lake to me was this little lagoon below Castaic Lake, and I don't know, it's 100 or so acres, and it's pretty clear. I think and I don't even think I had a graph the whole time I was in California. Just a bare bones, like paddle only kayak, 12-footer. So stable, you can stand in it, but
Mhm.
it wasn't the easiest thing to fish the big baits with. But I experienced that a lot, throwing a soft swim bait and just sort of reeling it steady and watching them come up behind it and follow it to within, 20 feet of the boat a lot of the times, and then just turn off.
Yeah.
And I couldn't I could never figure out if it was just time of day, it was too clear, too sunny, if I needed some wind or what, but I don't know. I feel like I get follows with those big baits, but I struggle to actually get them to commit.
Mhm.
And it's interesting you mentioned the glide baits. Is that I feel like you can trigger them. Is that fair? Like, because you
Absolutely.
can do stuff with it, it
Mhm.
like you and I've not thrown a mag draft a ton, but I guess you mentioned the mag draft, and I know Russ, has done a lot of damage. He's the first guy that I heard talking about it publicly, and even that one, I've not thrown a ton. I think I've caught a couple. I've tried to throw it more this year, and I catch, little fish on it. I can't seem to get the bigger bites, but I feel like you have to reel it at a slow, like, if you don't hit the right speed, it
It's a
won't run right.
bait.
Say
There's
that one more time?
said it's a one speed bait. There's that certain
Yeah.
retrieve. That's where it is. Any faster, it starts kind of rolling on its side. Any slower, it just doesn't kick or wobble right.
Okay. So you still throw the mag draft?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's a
So
it's more of a spinnerbait than to me than anything else. I don't really throw a spinnerbait anymore. Just
really?
no. I The only spinnerbaits I own now are 3/4 of an ounce, have a Colorado blade, and they're black for night fishing out here.
No.
I don't. I can't tell you the last time I threw a traditional spinnerbait. It's
Okay. So the swim bait actually replaced that for you.
yeah. It's kind of if I'm just going because a spinnerbait was something you go get on a windy bank, and you chuck it wherever you're fishing, and you wind it. If I'm getting on a windy bank, I'm throwing a mag draft or a smaller glide bait, even sometimes a bigger glide bait. But yeah, it's just in tournaments nowadays, everyone's so good. You have to do something that separates yourself. And I just feel like a spinner bait no longer is something that you can be better than the other guy at. Everyone's good at
Okay.
throwing because it's you can put some pops into your rod and whatnot, but it's I mean I could be wrong, but I feel like
Anybody can do it basically.
yeah, like everyone that's a solid fisherman, which if you're fishing a tournament, you have enough confidence in yourself that you think you can have a shot at it. All those guys, they're going to be good at throwing a spinnerbait or good enough. I'm
Gotcha.
it's not my strong suit. There's some people that understand it on a different level with these conditions, this different blade or whatnot, but I've just it never stuck with me. I threw it a lot 2, 3, 4 years ago, but at this point in time, it very rarely comes out.
Okay. For me, it's kind of a dirty water deal.
Mm-hmm.
I throw it a lot more, or I've. It's like it's funny you mentioned like trying to do something different from everybody else. I'll throw these little finessier ones, like
Mm-hmm.
a lot smaller and lighter than most guys will throw. What is it? I think Z-Man makes a couple of them that are they're I'll throw them for smallmouth in the rivers some, but
There's
they're like a finessey deal with light wire, not your power fishing.
there's a really cool spinnerbait that Molex used to make it. It was the Water Slash. I'm not sure if they make it anymore. I know that Duckett now makes one that's identical. Um, but
Okay.
that's one spinnerbait that I will throw occasionally on the river. It's a very compact spinnerbait. You can burn it really fast and it'll stay true.
Hmm.
But I
Okay.
buy those when I go to an event that I think I'm going to need it.
Gotcha.
I'll probably have 2 or 3 in my box when we go up to the Susquehanna. But
Okay.
yeah, it's
So help me with the mag draft. Like I know there's guys that still throw, and that's what I bought first was the what do they call it? The loaded one, not the loaded, the pre-rigged one
Pre-rig,
with
yeah.
the belly treble hook.
Mhm.
And like you said, you throw it out and you kind of can tell when you start getting that right thump that it, and you can look at it in clear water and see that it's swimming
Mhm.
right. But I've heard, from and I won't name names, but I've heard from a number of different guys that throw that bait. They don't like the belly weighted one or the belly hook one as much. They'll get the other one and then put a big, uh, like basically rig it weedless style.
Mhm.
And is that in your opinion, is there anything to that, or are there times where both work?
I like the harness one, but that's
Harness.
yeah.
That's the word I was looking for.
I'm in East Tennessee. If you catch a 5-pounder on our lakes, a lot of our lakes, it's a big one. If you catch a 3-pounder, that's a very, very good addition to your limit. Um,
Okay.
well, in kayak terms, I don't really fish the lakes around here out of a kayak, but like a 17, 18 is a really good fish. Whereas, a 20, 21 inch fish is going to be your kicker. But like those 17s and 18s, yes, they can get that belly weight in their mouth, but you have a whole lot better of a chance hooking them on that harness because if you look 90% of the time they eat it head first
Mm.
and that hook's right there. They have to eat basically the entire bait to get them on that belly weight. The guys that told you probably Texas, Florida, Alabama, could be wrong. Well, maybe
There's
Virginia.
actually some smallmouth guys that do it that way,
Not me.
which that was my thing. Is like the hooks. Those hooks are so big. Like I see
Mhm.
everybody talk about what is it, the beast hook, or Trocar's got one. I've heard, Zaldane's got his swim bait, the dangerous, that's real similar to the mag draft, and he's throwing I mean, it's essentially the same. It's a giant, big gap hook that I just don't. I mean, a smallmouth has to like completely engulf that thing and have it, dang near in the crushers before you can. I feel like I just feel like I'd miss a ton of fish. But these guys catch them and do a lot better than me.
It's You'll have to get one of them on it to talk about that. Really,
I'm curious.
that's not for
I'm
me.
curious if our other we've got another guest I think is going to join us in a little bit, and I
Pretty
want
sure
to
he does
ask.
it a lot.
Okay, because I it would make sense. He's in one of the states that you mentioned. They got some big greenfish, and it's something that I want to try around grass. Honestly, I threw a chatterbait a ton around grass, but I'm curious to see how I can make that thing work.
I've
And
done it
that's
around grass a few times, but that's looking for a kicker bite,
mm,
not necessarily limit fillers. But I have
gotcha.
caught a lot of on that belly weight through grass. I have caught a lot of 16 to 18-inch fish that I
Okay.
wouldn't expect to catch on that with that 7 auto hook
The
on it. But
gaff,
yeah,
shark
absolutely.
hook.
It just something doesn't sit right with me about that. I already have trouble with even like on a 4.8 Kitech with a belly weight. I already have problems losing fish and not hooking them. Just
Yeah.
that's something about that style of hook. It doesn't get them great.
Do
Um,
you I don't know how much fishing you do outside of a kayak. I've I mean, I guess I'll wade some. That's about the only time I'm out of a kayak anymore. I don't have access to the bass boat, but that's one of the things that I think about. I don't know if there's any truth to it, if I'm completely off base, but I feel like in the kayak, especially like my smaller little 10-foot kayak, like setting the hook, I worry about setting the hook with these bigger, you know, like gaff of a hook because I'm not standing flat footed and I can't get leverage. Are you like, am I completely off base there? Or is that
I'm not doing it in a kayak.
okay? So
Simple.
when
You
you're
Most of your hook sets in a kayak are going to be subpar. Uh, And that's one of those baits that I feel like your hook set has to be perfect every single time, because it's a lot of hook, a whole lot of hook. That's the only thing that that I know of, at least, that you're fishing a 6, 7, or even 8/0 hook on. Um,
Yeah, where it's and where it's buried too. It's not
it's yeah, it's a big old hook, and it's got plastic to come through as well.
it's not just a reel and lean into them. I feel like there's a ton of techniques where like my hook set is that a lot of times. Like with the chatterbait, a lot of times I'm not, feeling it and cracking them. It's a sort of load up and sweep into them. And even a worm set for me is I'm reeling down and then I'll give it a little bit more torque, but that's one of the things, especially like if I'm on my Outback's a little bigger, but the other kayak, I just it's tough to set the hook. I've punched out of that little kayak before, but even that, I don't know, somehow it feels different. Like if the kayak is wedged in a mat, I'm a little more grounded, I feel like. But that's one of the reservations that I have with the swim baits. So I'm glad I'm not the only one
Yeah.
that's afraid to throw those giant gaffs. So you like the regular mag draft. What
Yes.
about have you played with, I don't think I have it here. I grabbed a few, what are these? The dangerous ones.
I have.
These,
I've only played with the top hook line through.
mhm.
I don't know if it's where I'm in East Tennessee and we've got smallmouth and our largemouth aren't that big. I feel like with Florida strain bass, you would have better success with it, but I've had like really bad problems losing them on it.
Gotcha.
And I mean, when that hook or that bait slides down your line, it's got a single hook to knock into and punch it out.
Oh, you think so it's not even just the hook. You're thinking that the weight sliding on the line through would potentially.
Well, typically a line through slides up the line, but I have had with that particular swim bait, I've had multiple times where a fish comes up and jumps, and I watch my swim bait go down and hit that hook and knock it out.
That's crazy. I would not have thought. And granted, I've not I have it. I've thrown it a little bit. I've not caught any on that top one. Um, again, I've not given it a ton of time, but I was thinking it was actually an advantage. Like it's I don't even know how to describe it. Like I always thought the line through like I was those big heavy baits when that fish comes up and shakes his head, that big heavy bait, it's easy for him to throw. I thought the idea of, okay, well, that piece of plastic slides out of the way, that's awesome. But I never thought about what happens when it slides back down.
Yeah, and that's all dangerous swim bait. That top hook, both the I think it's a shallow and deep is what they call it. It's slow sink and fast sink. They
Mm,
have a better action than a mag draft, in my opinion. It gets bit really, really good, but I have personally had issues keeping them hooked.
okay. So have you tried I guess the one, because as far as I know, they don't make one that's got the harness on it.
They don't.
But have you tried? I saw Chris Zaldane had a video where he was showing a couple different ways to rig the original, the one that's uh, I don't even know I can't remember what they call it. The unloaded, maybe it's just the
Mhm.
solid piece of plastic, like real similar to the mag draft, where you can, I think one of them he puts it on a lead head, kind of like your traditional swim bait, just a big hunk of lead and a hook that's exposed, and then he had a cool line through thing that I got the stuff to make them, but it's almost like a line through, but you're just making your own harnessed one. But I was curious to see if you've tried that at all, if you've
I
monkeyed with
haven't.
that.
The only reason I bought that Zal Dangerous swim bait is because of that top hook. I loved the idea of it. I need to mess with it with some bigger fish, because I'm wondering if when I'm leaning into a 2 pounder, there's not, on my end, it might be the same, but on that fish's end, it doesn't have as much resistance as, say, a 4 or 5 pounder that I can really drive that hook in. It's a 4 or 5/0 flipping hook. Pretty sure it's a mustad, because if you hold the mustad flipping hook up next to it, it's almost identical, if not identical.
Okay. So you're saying that 2 pounder, you set the hook on it and it starts coming towards you. That bigger fish, it holds and it's not moving and creating slack and
It's
softening that hook set.
the same deal as like if you're punching, you hook a 14-incher, it comes off a lot. You hook a 5-pounder, that hook's buried through the roof of its mouth and it usually doesn't go anywhere.
Gotcha.
Because you have that weight that you're pulling against the fish to. So it's on both ends. Our kayaks slide towards the fish, but when the fish is towards you, it has the same effect.
Yeah, I definitely notice. I hate when that like setting the hook and then starting to like just slide towards the fish and then the fish is coming at you. I absolutely hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to go to higher gear ratios, at least for some techniques, just to like I hardly throw in pre-spawn a little bit. I'll throw a 6-1, but I hardly throw a lighter than a 7 anymore or slower than a 7, just because I want to be able to catch up to him if I get in that situation where you set the hook and the fish is coming at you and you're going to him and you can't keep the line tight.
And on those tournaments where a 14-incher matters a lot, it's really
frustrating. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's been a few where I'd love to have a 14 to go with with 3 good ones.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we talked about the mag drafts. So you like the slow and steady with that. You mentioned glide baits. Are there any I guess before we jump into the glides, you ever throw the rats?
I don't.
Okay.
Jordan Marshall it's Jordan Marshall and Eric Thomason. They both throw the rats a lot. They like those. It's just wake baits. I'm not a huge big wake bait guy. I think I own 1 or 2. Okay. They're somewhere buried in a box. It's just not me. That's another one of the things that I would rather be throwing a glide bait where I can. The rat's the same situation as a soft swim bait. You get a fish coming in behind it. Like, sure, you can stop it. You can kind of twitch it, but it's not the same effect as a glide bait.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I've caught a few on it. I've got like for rats. That's kind of what we're talking like for anybody that's watching. That's the Spro rat. Honestly, I bought when I went to California. I spent way too much money. I don't know how many of the tactical bassin videos I watched. I bet I watched every video they made on swim baits for like a 3 or 4 year period, and just went on a little spree and spent a bunch of money. I'm going to catch them on this and this and this. And rats was one of the things that I bought a few of. I can't remember the name of, but I bought some expensive, fancy custom one. But I like the little. I never caught a fish on it, but I've caught a couple on that, and I do not pretend to know the secret to it, but I will say that. Cheap $50 Spro one. It's the 50 size. You can walk it. It's not, it's not going to walk as well as like a spook, but if you give it slack, you can kind of make it sit in place. But it's still very different than a glide bait, at least from what I've seen. So what's the other one that I've caught a few fish? Actually, I've probably the swim bait that I threw more than anything before the last year and a half or so was a bull shad. Have you ever, do you throw that one much?
My PB from 2018 or 2019 until this spring was on an 8-inch bull shad.
8-inch. Okay.
I haven't caught many fish on it. I actually threw one a little bit on Saturday. I think I threw it for like 4 or 5 casts and then down. Now that is a bait that there are certain times where that super fast burn pause can really get them going because they get in so fast behind it trying to keep up, and it stops, and they've got a choice of either just go down and keep swimming or open their mouth and eat it because it's right there in their face. They're already moving. It can be extremely effective. I feel like the best way to fish it, the only way I like to fish it, is waking it extremely fast as I can reel, and you kill it, and it just kind of darts off to the side, almost like a glide bait would.
Yeah.
But it's still getting closer as far as the reactive goes, but you can't manipulate it quite as much.
Gotcha. I like how you said that. I don't think I could say that any better. And I don't have a ton of experience with it, but it's one of the baits that even in super clear water, I was able to catch fish in California, just lobbing it out there and just as fast as I could burn it on the surface. I feel like that was one cool thing about it, is that they just didn't get enough time to sit there and inspect it. They're either gonna, it's gonna go by, or they're gonna, come unglued on it.
And I think
And
the
I've
most effective part about that bait is how fast you can fish it without it blowing out. I don't think there's another bait on the market that you can burn as fast as you can burn a bull shad without it tilting on its side or completely flipping over.
I like it. Yeah, I've never fished one. And I've never fished the 8-inch version. I think the one that I've thrown the most is the 7. I think I have a couple of the 7s, but I can't burn them out, or blow them out rather. They, as fast as I can reel it, they stay straight. And I've caught a few with that stop and start also, but I've never caught a fish with it trying to do it slow. Kind of like with your mag draft style retrieve. It's always been either burning it, or I'll kind of slowly start it, like get it moving, and then a quick burst, and a slows down, and a quick burst. Not necessarily a complete stop, but a burst, slow down, burst, slow down. And that it sounds like that's the way to make that bait.
Yeah, that's how it was designed to be fished. I've talked to Mike Buka about it, and he designed it to be burned really fast or burned and paused. It's not a slow, steady whine. It's just, he was looking for a reactive jointed swim bait that I don't think, at least at the time he came out with it, there was nothing like it.
Gotcha. I like it. All right, before I jump into the glide baits, because I know that's where I want to go, because I feel like
I've got a lot laying here to talk about.
awesome. So before we jump into that, I want to talk conditions a little bit, because that's one of the things that I feel like I know, you always hear overcast, right before a storm, like kind of typical times, you get a little bit of wind, those type of situations, maybe early and late in the day, the fish are going to be more aggressive. Are those the conditions that you're looking for, or does it vary with these baits?
Well, it's big baits or something. I've been fishing since I was in middle school, and I'm about to graduate college. So that's a long time to be playing with it. It started off in ponds and sneaking into neighborhoods and stuff, but it's developed quite a bit. But just, it's one of those things I've kind of developed just a sense of, I need to try this right now. Just, I've caught them in sun, slick, sunny, and windy, rainy, stormy, about any conditions, dead of winter, dead of summer, anywhere in between. There's a time and a place for it. And I think about anywhere you go, there's a place on that body of water that's the bait to be throwing. Whether you get around it or not, that's someone can. but it's just you kind of get a feel for it. And in tournaments, it's a little bit different for me. I like to I like to fish it a lot of the times. Like if it's fishing really really good, I like to throw the big swim baits to separate myself. Or on the other hand, if it's extremely tough, if I'm not getting many bites a day, I might as well throw something big and try to increase the size of my bite.
Okay.
But a lot of those in between kind of average fishing are when I feel like traditional baits excel.
Gotcha. So it's that gut feeling, just something that you're going to develop with
Mhm.
hours and hours, time on the water, with that bait in your hand, figuring out kind of, okay, it worked for me in this situation. It didn't work here. Gotcha. So no real secret. Just throw it and
Throw it and get some sort of glide bait in your hand, and or glide bait, big swim bait, anything, and just put in time. It's one of those things. I Most baits I can explain why I'm throwing it when, but a glide bait's one of those things. I'm out there fishing. Now there's some tournaments you go to, like when I won Seminole. You're going to Seminole. There's giants in there. I'm gonna bring all my glide baits with me. But then
okay.
there's other tournaments that I have one or two in my crate, and I'm just fishing along, and something tells me, "Hey, you should throw this right now." But it's time on the water is best way to figure it out.
Gotcha. So well, let's jump into the glide baits. It sounds like that's what you throw. Is it fair to say that's what you throw most of the time when you're throwing a swim bait, a big swim bait? Is that it's some type of glide?
I have spent way too much money on them because I love it so much. It's such a fun way to fish, and there's even though it's a glide bait, like it's put into one category, but there's so many different actions that you can get out of different baits, and for different times of year, different conditions, all sorts of stuff. But we'll kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So what I guess first off, what is a glide bait? Are you throwing like a two joint, a three joint?
A glide
What
bait,
makes it a glide?
a glide bait would be, some people say there's some three joints that people consider glide baits, but I would consider it a single joint swim bait that you impart the action with either your rod or your reel, and make it dart back and forth in a similar way that a spook or a fluke or something of that line would work.
Gotcha. Oh, I just noticed our second guest, and it is totally my fault for sending him the wrong time. I forgot he's in a different time zone, but I want to jump. Yeah, another. We're talking to Ewing, fantastic angler. I got another fantastic angler. He also had a good weekend this past weekend down in Texas. He's won on the national scene. He's what's the word? He's dangerous anywhere in Texas. Welcome, Matthew Scotch.
What's up, guys?
How's it
Hey,
going?
we just got into I think Ewing's favorite part of this, the glide baits. So
Yeah, I was listening. Everything he was saying is pretty much right on point. It's very instinctual. It's kind of like you just get a feeling that like it's time for the big bait. It could be something you see, it could be the fishery, kind of like how it's fishing. If it's fishing really good, just like you said, it's a really good way to try to catch a 23 plus inch fish because those fish kind of key on a bigger bait more times than not. And when they've been pressured with a bunch of conventional tackle, you pull out the big bait and it before, a few years ago even, they hadn't seen it as often. They're starting to see it a lot now. I mean, glide baits and big swim baits are becoming the norm, and they're getting a little bit more conditioned to it, in my opinion. But man, I mean, they will absolutely just turn on it like they won't on conventional tackle some days.
gotcha. So Ewing, are you noticing the same thing? Because you guys are in different parts of the country. Ewing, you're a little closer to me. Is it catching on as much, or do you still feel like you can trigger them?
It's catching on a lot, and I will say I think the Spro Chad is the worst thing that ever happened to glide bait fishing. I personally don't like the bait, but it's getting into that high quality glide bait that everyone can go out. You can go to Bass Pro Shops and buy it. It's widely available, and it used to be like a S Waiver was the best thing available in stores, and it's just made it so they're seeing, even if you have a bait that looks better than it, they're looking at something that's very, very similar profile, action, that it looks good. And if I'm throwing a real Chad and someone's throwing a Spro Chad, the fish is going to relate that to the bait that he's seen who knows how many times.
Okay, so you think it's killing, or not necessarily killing, but it's
There's-
making that original less effective?
Not all the times, but it's just in general, it's putting a good glide bait for plastic bait standards into a lot more people's hands than previously.
Okay.
Like you're saying, it's more mainstream now. It used to be you go out and you're throwing a big glide bait, even like a 6-inch glide bait. I'd go out and fish it in high school, and people say, "What are you fishing for with that thing?" And now it's, you've got Milliken out there, and he's got everyone into it now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The swim bait thing's definitely become mainstream.
Gotcha.
It was kind of a cult thing there for a long time. It was like a cliquey group, and now a lot of the tournament anglers have definitely adapted it, and then just like regular fishermen are really throwing them. And like I said, the fish are definitely getting conditioned to it in some lakes. They don't get as fired up for it as they used to. Like it's kind of got to be right conditions and everything. Where before you could go out there and just fish it every single day and do pretty dang well.
It
Gotcha.
used to be, if you got a fish that was hot after your bait, you could make it bite it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I feel like most days I'll have 5 or 6 followers before I get one to even try to pop at it.
Gotcha.
Just on a average day out there fishing. But it used to be, if one came up on it, it was
going to rip it out of your hands.
It was at least going to open its mouth and try to get it. Whether I hooked it or not's another question.
So I'm glad that you said that. It makes me feel a little bit better about my own experience, because we were talking a little bit before the show started. I'll show off that I bought a pretty inexpensive glide bait and was playing around with it. And I was just curious to see if I could get some of these smallmouth to eat it, because kind of like we were saying, I was throwing the mag draft style. I threw the cull shad a little bit, but stuff that I couldn't do much to it. And I just had these fish follow it, and they'd follow it a long ways, and then they'd see the kayak and they'd turn away. I went back to that same water a few days later with that glide bait that I had made some adjustments to, and it was like it was a different place, like a different body of water. Like I could do stuff to it, and like they would actually react to it and thump it. And I mean, it's smallmouth have a little mouth. The bait I was throwing was relatively big compared to the size of their mouth, so I'd still lose a few, but I caught a bunch of fish compared to having them look at this other bait. But I went and played around with it again. I've been out one time with it since, and it was much more like what you're describing. A bunch of fish follow it, but it was hard to actually make them eat it, even with some of those reactions. So I feel a little bit better. It's not just me. It's kind of a universal thing. But what Ewing, you said something about the Chad that you don't like it in particular.
Mhm.
What what differentiates that, not necessarily from the KGB version, but from other glide baits? Like, do they run different? What separates, say, like a $50 to $60 bait like this from some of these ones that are what, 200 to 300?
Well, I don't know what it is about plastic versus a resin bait. But like the Spro Chad in particular, it almost like when you glide it, it nose dives down. And it's not as fluid, I guess I could say, as a
Okay.
resin bait would. For example, I used to have a Hinkle Shad. It's no longer with us, but one of my buddies, he paints baits, and he got a bunch of the Hinkles that are, well, it's called a Finkel, but it's the plastic one that's basically identical. The only difference is it's plastic, and it doesn't even come close to as far as like it's too narrow. Like the joint's the same angle, but the glide is too narrow on it. It won't continue to travel through the water. I don't know what makes it do it. It took me a long time to finally break down and buy a glide bait that was not plastic, but when I did, I went in pretty deep to it and spent some serious cash on them.
So you noticed a pretty significant difference just in that composition, what that bait's made of.
Absolutely.
Are you noticing the same thing, Matt, with plastic versus the wood or the
Absolutely.
resin?
Yeah. So your bait makers are charging, $150+ for these baits. They're really putting a lot of time and effort into it and fine tuning their it's artwork. And when it's in the water, it's like poetry in motion, man. And so there's a big difference, in my opinion, in the high end baits versus the ones that are kind of just like a generic production baits, kind of like the Chad. Chad will catch fish, absolutely. But like I said, when you start throwing the nicer, like a handmade bait, kind of like this one right here, that's a Texas swim bait, glide bait. This thing just freaking glides in the water so much better, in my opinion, and it just gives you confidence, when you have a nice, really nice bait, that you have something that you're going to trigger bites with. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that the Hinkles, like I said, the Texas swim bait, glide bait, there's a number of them. I mean, the Piz ones, I mean, they're all very good, and there's a reason that the bait makers can charge, upwards of $150, and people stand in line for hours on end to get their hands on them.
Yeah, I notice all across my social media feed. I feel like it's I can't remember what the bull shad one's called,
Trick
but
shad.
yeah, another new
Fantastic bait.
color dropping this day, and I feel like I get that for a bunch of the different manufacturers, and I'm still I was, like I was saying earlier, I kind of went off the deep end a little bit when I first went to California, bought a whole bunch of different stuff, thinking, I didn't really know, I hadn't thrown it. I probably should have just bought, a few and played around with them first. I spent a ton of money on them, but most of them sit in a box now. And I don't have any of those really, like, the high end custom ones. Everything was a production bait that I have. So I have yet to take that plunge and spend, that extra money to get that, what would you say, the more fluid one.
Yeah.
But you guys are getting me. You guys are getting me there, though.
Like this one right here is another really nice one, super high end. It's a Trashy, really like a highly sought after, super sweet swim and glide bait. Like I said, there's a reason these things, the performance of these baits, I mean, it's unreal. And when the fish are seeing a lot of swim baits, it definitely helps to throw something that looks and swims about as good as you can get.
You said you've got a few laid up to talk about. What
Yeah.
what are some that you like? Maybe not your favorite, the one that you're going to throw on the Susky, but let's see the other ones.
I won't glide bait on the Susky. But No, as far as glide baits go, say I think one thing that people really overlook is profile. I think that profile matters more than even your color of your glide bait. Like this weekend, I was throwing. This isn't actually technically a glide bait, but it is when you take the bill out of it. This is just a tiny clash. It is a plastic bait, but the way that it's designed with that joint, you can see it goes all the way across the tail sideways. I've owned this bait for almost 2 years and hated it until a couple weeks ago. I just figured it extremely reactive bait in that profile, which I also have same like the depth swim baits. These are also plastic. I like those in cold water fishing for like trout eaters. But the reason I went with that clash this weekend over a shad profile is because I wasn't positive at first until after I caught some of the fish on it, but there's a bunch of suckers in that river. And that was, as far as the bigger forage, that was what I saw the most there. So I didn't want to throw this is probably my favorite glide bait of all time. It's a BIG's B1. I think they're made in Texas.
They are. Used to be.
Yeah, but it's similar to a shad. It's got the feather tail. I really like that in a bait. I feel like it helps it stay level in the water a lot more and stay more fluid, like I was talking about. That's and this B1, I think they're like $80 for a painted, and I think you can get unpainted for 60, which is another thing that bothers me about people buying the Spro Shad is you spend a few more bucks and you get an excellent bait. But it's that profile in a glide bait. Like here, I've got this one's a Zimmer something bluegill. We call it the Gillinator just because anytime that you're around either when the bass are spawning and the bluegills are coming in and terrorizing their nest, or you're around the bluegill spawn, just having that bluegill profile to it makes a huge difference compared to throwing a shad profile bait, shad color around that time of year. And it's just, that was kind of the biggest step in my glide bait fishing, was going from just throwing like your S-wavers and your Arashis, just those slender baits all the time, to when I'm fishing for fish that eat gizzard shad or threadfin, trying to match that profile to where my bait actually looks like what they're eating instead of just, it's got a trout profile, but it looks like a shad. Because, I mean, both of my depths, that doesn't look anything like a trout, but I throw it around trout lakes. That's just the one that I found a good deal on. Why I say profile matters more. I'll go throw that bait on a lake with trout eaters in it, and they'll come unglued on it. I can come throw my shad profile baits on that same lake, and they'll follow it, but they won't commit. You can get some to eat it, but it's just not what they're accustomed to eating.
So that clash, you were specifically going for like that sucker kind of profile, that long, slender versus a bluegill or a shad.
That clash, it's really good in current. A lot of glide baits, when you get in strong current, they tend to roll over. And I think it might be where that tail is vertical, current pushes on it, it's going to try to get it to lean over. This tail, where it's horizontal, it'll help keep that bait level almost. I'm not sure. I don't know the science behind it. I just throw it. I still don't like it on lakes, but it's a phenomenal bait when you get in current. it almost completely changes it. It glides, in my opinion, it glides better in current than it does in slack water. And you can't make it do exactly what you want, kind of like some of the other glide baits. It's got a mind of its own. But those other glide baits are pushed so hard by the current. Like they'll glide down current a good ways, and then it's hard to get them to come back up current. Whereas that bait, you can just yank on it, and it stays true. I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with it. I had caught less than 10 fish on it before Saturday, and I bet I caught 30 on it. It was, and I've thrown a lot of glide baits on that river. I had just kind of, the last trip before that tournament that I took out there, towards the end of the day, I started to get onto that, and I saw how the bait was acting in the water. I mainly threw it because resin baits are fragile, and if you hit them against a lot of rocks, they will break. I've broken several. It's a heartbreaker when you sling a $150 bait and it hits a dock or a rock or whatever and splits in half. It is one good thing about, I have nothing to do with bigs, but these baits, they come with the lifetime guarantee. If it doesn't swim right, if you break it, he'll send you a new one. I don't know the guy or anything, but really good company, really good baits, stand behind his product. But just, I threw that because I was skipping it up under, low hanging trees and stuff. And I didn't want to be doing that with one of my more expensive baits. And I noticed that it was handling the current so much better. And then I noticed how much the fish were liking it. So next time I was in the tournament and started off my morning with that double, it was hard to put it down, and they really, really seemed to like it.
That is some juice. I'm I don't remember the exact way you worded it, but you said something in there about the action. I know earlier you mentioned the fluidity or the flow. What action are you guys trying to go for? Is there a specific retrieve that, or is it just a feel thing where you kind of play around with different things? What are you trying to make that glide bait do in the water?
It's kind of, I always tell people like bass are kind of like a cat, and it's a lot of times it's kind of laying there waiting to ambush something. You're just trying to trigger it, so you're trying to give it some sort of motion, either where you're ripping it or normal. For me, it's normally when I speed it up. Some people really catch them good with like a slower retrieve, but for me, I seem to trigger them more when I cut it and I make it zig or zag, and then I let it kind of glide, and normally the bite comes in. But yeah, this is kind of me personally. I tend to catch more of them like by speeding it up and getting them to react to it.
Okay.
He's absolutely right on that one. Speeding it up is almost always how you can get them to bite. For me, a glide bait's 99% of the time it's visual, whether that's with my eyes or with my electronics. I like to see how the fish is following the bait, see how it's reacting. And sometimes there's just little things like you can get a lot of these glide baits, you can get them to turn a complete 180 and face right at the fish. And that can, when you get a fish that you speed it up and they still won't eat it, if you turn it right, that's what happened. That big largemouth you saw with the bait backwards in its mouth. I kept speeding it up and it was just coming up and it would not eat it. And I turned it around facing towards it and it just lashed out and ate the whole thing head first. And that's reading the fish. That's part of the feel that I was talking about, that instinct of how a fish is moving in the water and what you might need to do to make it eat. And that's just trial and error. I've had a lot of really frustrating times with you've got a 7, 8, 9 pound fish right behind your bait, and you try something and it spooks it. That'll aggravate you a lot of the time. But when you start to figure out when they're following it in a certain way, to speed it up, slow it down, turn it towards them, it can just, it's really rewarding when you start to figure them out. Sometimes it's a particular day, sometimes it's the cover, whatnot, but it's so interesting how different fish act towards it and how you can make them react with the way you manipulate your bait.
So
And
for
Oh,
go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so little things like the line a lot of times can make a big difference too. Sometimes, I mean, there's times I like to use braid, especially if I have a net. You'll have people say, "Oh, yeah, never use treble hooks and braid," but what it is you can just get such a sharp reaction and such a direct response with like straight braid versus like throwing mono. Like I'm not a mono guy. I don't like mono with my swim baits. But there's some people that do. I like that quicker, that better reaction, because I feel like I can make the bait do more erratic stuff that triggers the fish to bite. So there's times I definitely like to use braid, and there's time, if I'm not using braid, I use fluorocarbon. And with fluorocarbon, it's not as dramatic of a jump that I can make the bait have, but I use that, in times when I feel like maybe I don't think they're ever line shy with a big bait. Truly, I just think sometimes I might need a little bit more stretch. Maybe a little bit more landing ability or whatever it is, and so I'll go with fluorocarbon. But yeah, I think the line definitely that you use makes a big difference on the action you can get out of the bait.
So I have been doing it wrong. I've been throwing 20-pound mono, and maybe that's part of my problem. So
Yeah,
I like what you said there with the braid, though. I guess it stands to reason. There's no stretch, so you don't have that load that you have with the mono.
Yeah, the only thing is, like, when you catch them with braid, you just want to have your net handy. You don't. It's not one of those times where you sit there and play them around the boat. You just got to rip them in really quick and try to land them so they don't get away on you. But as far as like action, and it has fantastic action on straight braid. And I know a lot of swim bait fishermen, like really good ones. I mean, Mike Buca's one. My buddy Bryce Bozeman's another. I mean, they're straight braid guys, and I mean they're really good at it. And it's kind of where I got that from. And another good thing about braid, if you ever cast it off, that braid's going to be floating on the surface. So you can go retrieve your $high swim bait down. Versus if you're throwing fluoro and it snaps, and you're gonna have to jump out there and try to get it or something. So just another positive thing about using braid for them.
Yeah, I saw that. I had that experience with fluoro. I watched that hinkle shad. I watched it sink down on live scope, and there was nothing I could do about it. I had it wrapped in lead wire, so it sank about like a rock, and it was just gone. I watched it just sail off. But yeah, that braid floating could definitely help. I've
had it happen before where I had to go hunt a bait down and the braid's still floating and I got it back.
Dude, that's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, that story might convert me.
It's just like fishing a topwater on straight braid. It's the same thing. How you can get those really erratic, really good jumps side to side. You're doing the same thing with the glide bait, and a lot of times for me, that's how I trigger them to eat it.
Ewing, are you fluoro most of the time, or
all the time?
All the time. Okay.
I'm a fluoro guy for almost all of my baits, and a glide bait's one of those ones that I haven't even messed with braid to know if I like it or not, and I probably still won't because I'm stubborn in my ways. But I'll throw anywhere from 15 to 25 pound fluoro. Like this little thing, I throw it on 15. It's like 4.5 inches. 6, 7-inch glide baits. I throw on 17. I get into, like an 8-inch glide bait. I go to 20, and then I've got some bigger 9 and 10-inch glide baits that I like to go to 22 or 25. And a lot of that depends on the bait. Like some 9-inch glide baits, I want to throw on 25 because it's like my Hinkle shad I liked on 25. It was a big, tall bait. The jump from 22 to 25 didn't affect that bait in the way that it swims. And that's kind of how I select my line size. You can keep going up and you'll eventually see where it hinders the action of the bait, just where I guess the diameter of it creates too much drag in the water and it can't glide to its full potential. And that's where, it's another thing that I do. It's really, really expensive, but Seaguar Tatsu, if you look at the diameter, Sunline probably, I bet their high-end line is the same way. But like 17-pound Seaguar Tatsu is the same diameter as 15-pound InvizX. So I'm able to get a 17-pound line but have the same drag as in the water as 15 with that. I don't know if it really makes that much of a difference between that small diameter change, but I have a little bit more confidence in it when I've got a thinner line. Matt and his braid, he's definitely got thinner line than me when he's throwing it, but just that thicker line, and even how you were talking about mono, that's even thicker than fluorocarbon. That's going to create more drag in the water than a fluorocarbon would.
It makes sense. The only good thing about my mono, well, I shouldn't say only, it's cheap. I like the stretch a little bit.
It does.
I've not done it a ton, but yeah, it's got a little bit of give to it. And now I'm curious to play around with these glide baits with something that doesn't stretch as much. Like I think the bull shad was the first swim bait I really threw a fair bit, and I have thrown that on braid, and I have seen how like you can get it to start really, really quick with braid, but I've never tried it with anything else. That was the only bait. It was kind of I was a one-trick pony at that point. I'd sling it out and just kind of burn it. So I've had that work, but I've never tried braid on a glide. And I've never even tried. I don't think I've tried fluoro. I might have done it in California a little bit, but I had no idea what I was doing in those days. So
another thing, just say no to connection knots. Don't do it. Just go straight fluoro or go straight braid, in my opinion. You tie a connection knot, you're just asking for heartbreak. You're asking to watch that bait go soaring off and to the distance. So
yeah,
straight line connection on those.
I'm glad you said that, because I know all the tactical bassin videos I watched, they were talking about a blood knot and a connection knot, and I've never had it fail. And maybe they haven't, but I feel like I've heard. Have you guys heard other people say that? Like, oh, I've never had this knot fail. It's like as soon as somebody says that to me, I call bullshit. Like maybe they haven't.
If they say it's never failed, it's just a matter of probability and cast before it does. So when baits cost as much as they do, there's no sense to risking losing them any more than we already do.
I've been using a FG knot for all my braid to leader for 3 or 4 years now, and I have never had it fail from tension. I have had it come unraveled a few times, but that's something you can usually see happening, and then you just look and you can slide your knot right apart like it was never a thing. But as far as fighting a fish or pulling to break something off, it's either going to break on my braid or it's going to break by my bait on my leader. I have not had that knot. I haven't pulled on something and had that knot come back where the braid was wrapped around my fluorocarbon. And it's just the way that knot works it's like a Chinese finger trap. The harder you pull, the tighter it gets and the stronger it's going to be. Whereas as other knots it's an actual knot that's holding everything together.
Now, admittedly, I've never tried an FG. Matt, have you ever done an FG?
I normally don't tie them, but I mean, I agree with Ewing that it's probably the best connection knot there is by far. But so a lot of times when I'm ever using a connection knot, it's something finesse application on a spinning rod, and I don't have, just the same way Ewing's saying, I don't have it break at the connection unless I'm really pulling. I get it hung and I'm really pulling on it trying to get it free. It With the fish, it never really breaks at the connection knot for me, because my drag is like generally pretty loose. And like I said, I'm definitely never doing it with a swim bait, not especially an expensive swim bait. I'm just not going to risk it. I have plenty of confidence just fishing on straight fluorocarbon or braid.
I like it. They're heavy too. I feel like, and I guess the other thing that worries me a little bit with connection knots, because I have had those connection knots where you wind up in, I think I was doing braid. I don't know if I was doing braid to mono but it was definitely a connector knot. And I don't know if it was just fraying from rubbing against stuff or going through the guides, but you cast and it separates there and goes flying. I mean, it could have been I tied a lousy knot too, but I've definitely launched baits before, those big heavy swim baits.
On Swim Bait Universe, you see it weekly where people go on there and say they cast their bait off and they're crying about it. It's, like I said, it's just not worth it if you're using high-end baits I mean, I don't think you're going to trigger that many more bites personally by having a little bit of fluorocarbon. When they're looking at when they're looking at a giant bait, that's what they're looking at. It's not the line. They're strictly keyed on what that bait's doing. And if you can trigger them and get them to play with it, like I said, that's really what it's about. And I don't think the line has a lot to do with it. I just don't like mono because kind of like what Ewing was saying is the diameter. You got to use if you're using 25 or 25 or 20 or 25, the castability of it's not very good. You're not going to get as good a casting distance. Like retrieve wise, like I don't feel like I get a good like a darting action with it. If you're using something that's straight line, like Buca Burrito or Texas Swim Baits has these, it's just a single hook paddle tail swim bait. That's totally fine using like some 20 or 25 pound mono with. But if you're trying to get gliding, darting action, like I said, it's just way better on fluorocarbon or straight braid, in my opinion.
So we've talked about some baits. We've talked about the line. What about the rods and the reels? What are you guys, Ewing? Do you have a consistent setup for everything, or does it vary as you go up to some of these big, heavy 3-4 ounce baits? Are you beefing up your tackle also?
Well, it does vary. The rod that I throw my smaller 5 to 7 inch glide baits, I like it's the 7'5" medium heavy Corrado rod is what I throw. I'm pretty sure every rod that Shimano and Gene Loomis makes that's a 7'5" medium heavies, at least the ones I've felt have been the same action. It loads all the way through the rod. That's the most important part. Brand doesn't matter really at all when it comes down to it, as long as you have something that when you lean into the fish, it's loading throughout the entire rod. You don't want a broomstick, even though you think, okay, I want a super stout rod so I can sling it. You're going to tear the hooks out of them. But when I go to my heavier baits, I can't throw them on that lighter rod. I don't even know what action it is. The 7 foot 4, I think. It's the SLX swim bait rod. I like it a lot, especially in kayaks. It's shorter. I don't like a super long rod out of a kayak. I've also thrown the Dobbins has I think it's a 7/8 swim bait rod that's really, really good. But really, just with those treble hooks, it's a big bait, but you still have treble hooks. You want to have the whole rod loading so you're not tearing the hooks out of its mouth.
Matt, I'm assuming you like his Dobbins rod there.
Yeah, definitely a good reference there. Obviously, I work for Dobbins, so pretty partial to the brand. I feel like the Fury swim bait, that might be the one he was talking about.
Yeah.
Really fantastic rod, perfect parabolic action, can throw a multitude of moderate sized swim baits, stuff up to like maybe 7 inches, about 2.5 ounces, very, very, very well. You start getting into like bigger baits, way more. You definitely need a bigger rod. And it's kind of hard to have a rod that will handle a heavy swim bait. And then, like Ewing was saying, to have the right parabolic action, it's super important because if the rod is too stiff, the same thing Ewing said, you'll rip the treble hooks out of the fish's mouth. And I feel like, we make some really nice rods. I've got another one right here. It's a Buka series swim bait rod. This one's a 836. Heavier stuff, upwards of 3 ounces I would throw on like this 836. Anything lighter than that, the 5-power 835. Ewing is saying he doesn't really like longer rods. I don't think it makes a difference to me. I sit down and fish primarily. I guess most Hobie anglers sit down and fish, and I really haven't found it to be a hindrance having a longer rod. I just feel like more times than not, it just helps you cast the bait. And like I said, I don't really find a problem with it. A really good rod that we make that fits a lot of swim baits. It's our A-rig rod, our champion. It's a 794.5 A-rig rod, so 7'9", 4.5 power. It's just, in my opinion, that rod is freaking sweet. It's got the perfect parabolic action. You can just do so many things with it. That rod's incredibly versatile. You can throw Alabama rig. You can throw 6 to 7 inch glides on it. You can spoon with it. It literally is a freaking sweet rod. I actually have it tied up in my truck right now from this past weekend. But yeah, Champion 794.5 AR, sweet rod. If I ever recommend one rod, that's the one to get. If someone needs a beginner rod, like just getting into it, the Fury 795 swim bait, really sweet rod too. It's a cheaper rod at 140, but highly recommend them. They're very good. Hell, I still use mine all the time.
I like it. I've got I've played around with a couple of cashin rods. The last, well, I got the last I've had the one maybe 3 months now. I've played around with that. Before that, when I keep referencing when I went to California, I think I bought a couple different variations. That was it, the 795? Was that the Fury one?
Yeah, there's a Champion 795 too, but the Fury one's a little bit more parabolic.
I was cheap and bought the less expensive one.
Yep.
I think it was the Fury.
Yeah.
But I definitely understand what you're talking about with that bend. It's almost like a crankbait type of rod, but it's still strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's a cool rod. So as far as like some specific baits, anything you set up to like a 6 or 7 inch glide would kind of max out that size.
I wouldn't be going with anything over that. Anything that's over 2.5 up to 2.5 ounces is going to be fantastic on it. You start trying to load up the bait with too much weight, the castability is going to go down on it. As far as being able to control the bait into tight areas and stuff like that, you're going to lose that. So it's rated up to like 5 ounces and you can lob it out there. But like I said, when it comes to like actually being able to guide a heavier bait, you definitely don't want to go with the top ratings on the rod. Like I said,
Okay.
something like a little over 2.5 ounces is perfect for it.
To be able to put it kind of where you want it,
Yeah, that way
accurately
you
throw
can
it.
exactly. That way you're not hitting the dock or hitting the rocks with it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that, banging into stuff.
For what I was saying about the shorter rod, it's not even like as far as when I'm fishing. That's not what the only thing that bothers me is in my kayak, especially a Hobie Pro angler. I use the rod tubes a lot. You get into up towards 8 foot, and I struggle to keep that stored in there. It's sticking way back, as well as in kayaks, we're netting our own fish. When you go to scoop that fish, it's a lot further away when you have a longer rod. I've got my net's extendable, and when I have used that, it is the what is it 794 795 Fury. That's the rod that I have used in the past. I had to extend my net in order to not feel like I'm fumbling around and about to lose a fish with that longer rod. But that's just something you have to take into consideration is when you're going to net that fish. You might have to have an extendable net that you can get out a little bit further than what you're used to with your 7 to 7.5 foot rods.
I like how you said that. Better than I could have said it. It's kind of the exact two things that I've run into is where I've got an Outback. Matt, you're out of an Outback too. Is that right?
Yep.
So it doesn't have those tubes to stick them in. So I've got them sticking out, and I've banged in the docks and not been paying attention and clipped the tree limb that's sticking out. And I've snapped some rods before.
Yep.
So I feel like anything that's a little shorter, I'm less like it's not sticking out as far. I'm less likely to break it. And then the other one is I remember I bought a 7-Eleven flipping stick years ago. I don't even remember if I was in the kayak or if I was in a little plastic John boat, but it just the rod, I felt like the fish would be close or I'd have the rod almost sticking straight up, but the fish would still be, it would have a lot more room that it could, more line out and more places it can go. And I remember feeling like handcuffed a couple different times. Like I couldn't get it close enough to actually net the fish with my little short handled net. So are you using a bigger net, Matt? Like a long handle?
My trick for landing the fish is I just stroke the shank of the rod and I just shorten it in that way and then I pull her into me. No, I mean,
Okay.
I'm just like y'all. I mean, a lot of fishing experience, and I'm trying to get that fish in the boat as quickly as possible.
So you're walking up the rod essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably have I'll probably have the first guide of the rod. I'll probably have my hand about right there, pulling the fish towards me, or pulling back with the rod over my head, and then snagging the fish.
God.
It's just something I do naturally. I don't know. I don't even think about it. You just got to do what you got to do to get that fish in the boat, and
Muscle memory.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, muscle memory and just in the heat of the moment, you just do what you have to do to snag that fish by any means necessary. There's times where I snag them like an eagle. I just freaking put the lock on them. There's times that you got to cradle them real quick, and there's times you stick the net out there for them, and it's just kind of you do what you got to do in the moment there. But I'd say more times than not, I'm gripping up the shank of the rod, pulling it in a little closer so that I'm not trying to land it with the whole length of the rod because I don't use a long handle net in the Outback. The reason being is I've lost so many long handle nets, and I know you know this. If you have them on the front of the kayak, you end up kicking them off or knocking them off, or rough water knocks it off. And so I go with a little short handle net, and I hardly ever use one. I'll tell you the truth. I really only use one if I see a fish is barely skin hooked with a treble hook bait or something. Then I might lunge for it with the net. But I'm trying to grab them with my hand every single time. Personally, the Outback's so close to the water that I feel like that. I just use my instincts and my You know, just my ability to grab things.
Yeah, you're reading the situation. I know exactly what you mean. And I believe it or not, I've lost a bunch of short-handled nets. I don't know. Have you ever tried those roto grips? Like I think it's the Ego Wade net that I've got, and I'll the handle of the thing, the little Yak Attack roto grip, it kind of snaps in there, and I'll still, even when I put that on the nose, like bolt in and snap the handle in, I'll still take a wave, or I won't be paying attention. There'll be something sticking in the water that grabs it. I've
I
I've
like the
lost
cheap
so much
$20
stuff.
net from Academy. The
Yeah,
float
yeah, yeah.
Academy. That's my favorite net. I think it's perfect for the outback. I use it a lot. So I use it a lot more when I'm red fishing, because with redfish, it's not like landing a bass is a very easy fish to land, in my opinion. Landing a redfish is much more difficult. Their gills are sharper. They cut you a little bit better. And so I tend to use it a lot more for redfish.
Gotcha.
But
I know the exact net you're talking about, and the only thing I don't like about it is when they get the treble hooks in it. It is a pain to dig the hooks out, and the big rubber coated with the big gaps. Like if I think I'm gonna have a treble hook that I might throw, I'll take that one.
that's why I
It's
just use it when I
expensive.
have to.
There you
And
go.
and for redfish, I normally not. It's just typically a jig head. You know, I don't have to worry about getting the treble hook stuck in there when I'm netting them. Like I said, I only
Gotcha.
use it for bass. I have it on the kayak, but I'd say 9 times out of 10, I'm just gonna land the fish with my hand. I like it. You know, that for me, that's part of the sport is grabbing that little bastard when he comes by.
I like it. Well, shoot, I'm looking at notes. I feel like we covered a lot.
We got one
Um,
last thing.
yeah.
So we were talking about the leverage that the fish have on that big bait earlier. So there's 3 different things that I either look for or do. First thing is a lot of glide baits, like this one, they've got swiveling hook hangers so that when the fish is thrashing around, it's not locking up and pulling it out. Another thing, I just recently discovered these hooks. I think they're Ryugi's. It's a quad, but if you see, it's actually got that swivel inside of the hook. They're $10 for a 2-pack. It's absolutely outrageous, but they're phenomenal hooks. And the third thing, Jordan Marshall taught me how to do this one, is the braided treble hooks. That does that same. There's not that split ring in there to lock up when they're twisting around. And I have noticed that does more than anything with your hookup to land ratio with a glide bait, is having that freedom with your treble hooks.
Absolutely.
So
I'd say the braid thing is probably the best, in my opinion. Where they spin all the way around. The only thing you have to worry about with stuff like that, it's kind of like a whopper plopper, where that fish can spin and it spins so much that you end up catching the other hook in your hand or something. But yeah, the braid or the treble hook is it's a sweet trick. Instead of like your standard.
So to
like,
tie
split
that, I've heard of guys doing that with conventional tackle, like for jerk baits or crankbaits. Is it just the same thing? Is there a special knot that you tie, and then roughly how much of a loop are you leaving in that braid?
It depends on the size of the treble and the size of the bait for me. But you have to use something to stick inside of to make that hole in there. You have to have like a screwdriver or an Allen key, some sort of any kind of stick that you can pull out of it. But I think I can't remember. I haven't done it in a while. It's like 2 overhand knots or something that basically holds it all together. It's really sketchy when you think about it, but I've fished with it a lot and I haven't had it fail a single time. But when I first started doing it, every time I set the hook, I was like, oh, my trebles are going to be gone. But it hasn't failed on me at all.
Yeah,
Cool.
definitely a good trick.
And Matt,
I'm pretty sure Steve Kennedy had his tied up like that this past tournament.
on Smith.
Yeah.
I saw like a real short clip. I didn't get a chance to tune into much of it, but I saw the real short clip with the one that he caught on a glide. Was that a real big glide or a
The Sneaky Pete, I believe.
Yeah,
okay.
That's in that 6 to 7 inch range.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, guys, unless there's something else I'm missing, I feel like we covered a ton. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully, everybody out there listening learned also. I can't thank you guys enough for the time and the juice that you shared. What I want to give you guys a chance to plug sponsors. So or really, I'll just give you the floor to whatever you want to talk about. You and I'll start with you. I've had you on longer. Anybody you want to thank or?
I gotta thank Dugout Bait and Tackle. He's Jamie. He keeps my kayak squared away with all the rigging and stuff. Don't have to mess with that nonsense. Worry about it on the water. Hobie, we all have them. All three of us. They're phenomenal pedal drives. I just love the way they work. Seagar, Shimano, G Loomis, Newport vessels. Those are people that they keep me going on the water, and if you're looking for some new products, go ahead and check them out.
Awesome, dude. Matt, your turn.
Yeah. So in my neck of the woods, definitely Mariner Cells, just like Jamie out there at Dugout. I mean, keeps me on the water. Do a fantastic job of supporting kayak angling here in the state of Texas and the surrounding area. And then since it's swim bait special, I mean, I'm just going to go with the company I'm affiliated with, the Texas Swim Baits. Pat, he makes fantastic swim baits. They're very hard to get. You got to get them on a drop kind of thing. But if you can get your hands on one, they are special. I mean, I wouldn't push them if I didn't think they weren't fantastic personally. I mean, I could probably join up with a bunch of different people, but Pat's baits are freaking fantastic. That was an 8-inch glide, and like here's a smaller, like a 6-inch thread fin. But fantastic baits. I believe in them. They catch fish, and it's a swim bait related show, so let's keep it at that.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you again. I'm hoping I get a chance to run into you guys at least one more time this year. You guys got any tournaments upcoming or?
I was looking at Susky, but I think I'm just going to stay here. I got my 12 days of vacation. I think I told you I'm going to do some hunting this fall. I'm going to use my vacation for some hunting time this season and, stay local. I'm doing really good here in Texas, so I'm just going to keep that up and try to double up a couple AOIs here that I'm leading. And I wanted to go to Susky. I was really thinking about it. I just ended up deciding to, like I said, save those days, and I'm going to use them in the fall.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you and I'm sure you're going to be up there. You've got a pretty good track record on the Susky.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite fishery in the country. There's nothing like it. And I mean, if anyone wants to go catch smallmouth in a river, it's the best one I've fished in my entire life. And I've fished a lot of smallmouth rivers, and there's nothing that compares to it.
It's a special place, man. It was very tough for me. I was planning on going, and I ended up. I still want to go, but just with everything, work and travel, and I was gonna have to fly up and borrow stuff, and it's just
that's at least what, a day and a half drive from Texas.
I was gonna fly in, but even that round trip tickets, to Harrisburg, it's pretty expensive right now. So
and then
everything
figuring
involved,
out the
it ended up
logistics
costing me about $1,500. So I decided I'd just hold back for now. And like I said, I want to go, but I'm gonna save that time for later in the fall.
Bassmaster's coming to you before too long.
Yeah, there's going to be the Caddo Bissano tournament, and that's going to be an absolute blast. So I expect it to be a complete banger.
Yeah, another epic fishery that I feel like both of those places, they're so much fun. I don't know if I'm going to make either, but it's like you said, they're so much fun. Even though I've not had good tournaments there, they've been awesome trips. Like they'll just the environment and the fish that are there. It's special, both places.
Yeah.
But I gotta stop it because I've kept you guys way too long. Thanks again, and I'm sure we'll talk soon here.
Absolutely.
Right. Take it easy, guys.
All right. Thanks again to those guys. Both fantastic fishermen. They dropped a lot of knowledge. I think I'm gonna go back and watch this one myself to try to make some notes on some of those baits. I've had some fun with the glide baits myself, some smaller ones here locally. I feel like I'm not necessarily starting to figure it out, but I'm starting to figure it out, if that makes sense. So this conversation has me juiced up to drop some more hard-earned money on one of the real high-end baits. So I got to figure out which one, but I'm yeah, I've got the itch to drop some money on one of these primo ones. But I'm actually going to show a pretty cool trick. So let's do this. It's time for the yakking on a budget segment, and I'm going to keep it in theme. So I'll preface this. I know some of the other tips I've given, it's all about saving money, how to do some kayak fishing and do it a little cheaper. But with this topic, swim baits, we talked about it throughout the show. They're not cheap. They're expensive. A lot of them are handmade. Ewing and Matt were both talking about how those resin baits, it's just something about that material that it works differently. It reacts differently than the plastic, but the plastic is cheaper. So my tip, this is still not a cheap bait, but for what we're talking about, for a glide bait, for a swim bait, this is about as cheap as you're going to find. And it's 6 cents makes it. It's the Flow Glider 130. I have not had it very long. I actually I got it because where I work, they sell them, and they also sell the Chad Shads. I lost the big muskie on one of these, and I think these run about $60, which is it's considered by most people inexpensive for a swim bait, but this is 25. So we're talking less than half of the Chad Shad. And I probably would not have gotten it had it not been for Ben Milliken, one of his videos that popped up in my feed. I saw him talking about a bunch of the different 6 cents baits, and he threw out some juice. I think the video is probably a year old, but you take this $25 bait and you take a rotary tool like a Dremel, and hopefully, sorry for everybody who's listening, I'll try to describe it, but right where this joint is, I'm trying to show it on the camera. The way the bait comes manufactured, it's kind of a solid V where the two segments come together. The head segment, the plastic actually extends up fairly high and it restricts the movement on this. It doesn't have a ton of action. This one has a whole lot more action than more side to side. There's a lot more space because I took a Dremel tool, copying kind of Milliken's little video and shaved down that plastic. And it completely changes this bait. It takes it from something that does not look very good in the water to something that looks good. And I'm not going to say I've caught a ton of fish, but I bet I've caught 20 now on this, which is a lot more than I've caught on some of the other baits. There's a few teeth marks on this particular one. I did it to a couple of them, just in case I run into a muskie and it steals it. But yeah, $25. So for a big swim bait, this is inexpensive. And if you've already got a Dremel tool, all you really need to do is, all I was using was a sanding tool on there, and just sanded down where that lip came up. It frees it up. And again, I apologize for how this probably looks on camera. I'm trying. But this is a whole lot more freedom that it has now after that modification. So assuming you already have the Dremel tool, you're not putting a whole lot of money into this, and you've got something that you can go out and catch fish with. I've caught smallmouth and largemouth with it. Biggest so far was 4.5 pound smallie. So hopefully that helps you. A relatively inexpensive way to get out there, and this is also dropped it. This is a relatively light swim bait, so this one isn't going to weigh as much as some of your other high end ones. It'll be a little bit easier to cast. You don't necessarily have to go out and get an expensive high end rod. I think that those high end rods, you get what you pay for. With those, you're going to have a better, like an objectively better rod, but you can take a flipping stick, I think, and get away with that less expensive bait, a way to kind of get into it again without having to spend as much as you would otherwise. So that is our yakking on a budget segment. And we are at an hour and 50 minutes at this point. So thank you to everyone who's made it this far. I think this is our longest episode to date. And we're down to the last segment. And I'll keep it pretty brief because I have rambled and rambled already. But I want to do our king of the week, queen of the week, and I'm gonna keep it simple. We just, we talked about it at the start of the show, the Hobie Worlds. I feel like everybody that qualified for that, looking at Tourney X, there are 50 guys and gals that qualified for that across a multitude of countries. So for all the people that qualified and got the opportunity to represent their home country at the Hobie Worlds, especially those from my home country here in the U.S., I'm going to give it to everybody. Everybody that qualified. It's something that I want to do one day. It's a huge honor. You could say the top 50 kayak anglers in the world. But that's my pick. All 50 of you, kings and queens of the week for this week. And that's going to do it for this edition of Kayak Fishing Weekly. Tune back in, and in a week we'll talk some more about kayak fishing. And now let's have another word from our sponsor.